The Sangre de Cristo Mountains in January. White teeth against a slate sky. Snow so deep the pines look shorter than they are. Down in the gorge, a single train pushes north. Steam torn sideways by the wind. The camera comes in closer to a platform of warped pine boards, a depot barely holding against the cold. A woman steps down onto the boards, 24, honey blonde hair coming loose from its pins, a traveling dress the color of dried burgundy, no gloves. Closer still, to her hands, her bare hands, pressed against her ribs, holding something under her coat that is not warmth, a small leather book. 11 days she has not let it out of her sight. Under the loading dock overhang, a mountain man stands watching, elk-hide coat, beard trimmed close, 15 winters in his eyes. He does not know yet what she has brought up his mountain, what 12 surveyors and a rich man in Denver would kill to get back, what 400,000 acres of stolen land will cost. She takes one step toward him. The wind stops. 4 days from tonight, Marigold Havelock would step off a train in a January blizzard into the yard of a man she had never met with a book against her ribs that could bring down half the federal government. Tonight she stood at her father's grave. The rain in Denver came sideways, the kind of rain that finds you no matter how well you think you're covered. Wrought iron gate, wet marble, a single lantern burning low against the wind. She held a leather book against her chest. Not a Bible, not a diary. Something worse. The grave was small, simpler than her father had deserved. Just his name, his dates. A line from Psalm 31 that her aunt had chosen because she couldn't bear to choose anything else. Beloved father, taken too soon. Marigold set the book down on the wet grass at the base of the stone. Not to leave it, just to touch it there, just to let him know. I found it, Papa, she whispered. The rain kept coming. I found all of it. She picked the book back up, tucked it under her coat, pressed her hand flat against her ribs to hold it there. Her hair had come loose from its pins. Wet gold against pale skin. She didn't fix it. She didn't cry. She had done all her crying 4 years ago, and she had made a decision back then about how much she was going to allow herself now, which was almost none, except when she looked at that stone. She stood there for another minute, long enough for the lantern to gutter twice in the wind. Then she turned and walked out of the cemetery gate and did not look back. 4 days later, she stepped off a train. The platform at Caldwell Crossing was not much of a platform. Warped pine boards, a single overhang, a depot that looked like it had lost a fight with a bad winter and never gotten up. She wore a traveling dress the color of dried burgundy, a wool coat cut for a Boston autumn, not a Colorado January, and no gloves. She had left the gloves on the train. On purpose, because she needed her hands cold when she stepped off. She needed to feel the actual temperature of the place she was going to disappear into, so that when the man came to collect her, and she looked at him, and he looked at her, she would not be pretending. She stepped down onto the platform, and she saw him. He was standing away from the depot, under the overhang of the loading dock, coat of dark elk hide, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, beard trimmed close. He was 34. He looked older. 15 winters in the Sangre de Cristo did that. Not tall exactly, but present. The way a chimney is present in a small room. You know it's there without having to look. He was looking at her. He was not moving. She walked toward him. The porter had put her bags down. Her hat box, her small trunk, her leather satchel that contained exactly 3 things. A change of clothes, a photograph of her father, and a small book bound in dark leather that she had not let out of her sight in 11 days. She stopped 3 feet from him. Mr. Haverford, she said. He looked at her. He did not answer at first. He looked at her like a man looking at a receipt for something he had not ordered. Miss Havelock, he said finally. Marigold, he nodded. Once. She could see him doing arithmetic in his head, adding up her coat, her hair, her hands, the particular way she was standing, subtracting. You're not what I asked for, he said. He said it without cruelty. He said it the way a man says a temperature, just a number in the air. She had been prepared for it. I know. You farm. No. Livestock. My aunt kept chickens, that's the truthful answer. He looked at her longer. The agency lied. The agency told you what you paid them to hear. Something moved behind his eyes, not offense, something more careful than that. Mr. Haverford. Cormac, I'll be direct. Please, I chose you, not the other way around. He waited. You had 4 cabins in the file. Yours was the farthest, that's why. Farthest from what? She did not answer. He looked at her. Then he said, "There's an eastbound train the day after tomorrow. I'll pay your fare back to Denver. You can tell the agency whatever you need to tell them. No hard feelings." She did not move. "I paid the agency," she said. "Not you. My contract, my decision." He blinked, just once. "That's not how these arrangements usually work." "I'm aware. You paid for a husband. I paid for a location." Silence. The wind came through between the depot buildings and lifted her hair. She did not push it back. He was looking at her with an expression that had shifted, not open, not yet, but shifted. "The trail is 4 hours," he said. "In this weather, closer to 5. There's no road, no neighbor within 12 miles. The cabin is one room and a curtain. And there's nothing about you that looks like it belongs up there." "I know. You keep saying that, because I keep needing to." Something at the corner of his mouth moved. "Justice of the peace is inside," he said. "We do this now or not at all. Now." They walked into the depot together. Percival Crowder had been performing weddings in Caldwell Crossing for 19 years, and he had stopped believing in most of them somewhere around year 6. He wore reading glasses. He kept his hair combed straight back with a comb dipped in water because he had never accepted that his hair was going to be gray forever. He looked up when they came in. He looked at Marigold. He looked at Cormac. He looked back at Marigold. "Ma'am," he said. "Sir." "You certain?" Cormac looked at her sideways, waiting. "I'm certain," Marigold said. Crowder took out the book. Horace Pembridge, the station master, was called in from the ticket window to witness. He had a mustache that had been fashionable in 1867 and had never been reevaluated since. He crossed his arms during the ceremony and did not smile. But when the vows were said, and Marigold said hers in a voice that did not tremble, Pembridge looked at her for a beat longer than a witness needs to. Their eyes met, just for a moment. Something passed there, something like recognition. She dropped her gaze back to the book. The ceremony took 11 minutes. When it was done, Crowder shook Cormac's hand and nodded at Marigold and went back to his office. Pembridge lingered. "You warm enough, Mrs. Haverford?" he asked. She looked at him. First time she had heard that name applied to her. "I'll manage." "Ride safe up that mountain." "Thank you, Mr. Pembridge." He held her look for one more second, then he touched his hat and walked back to his window. Cormac had not caught it. Cormac was outside already tightening the strap on the mule. Her name was Petunia. She was old. She was slate gray. She looked at Marigold the way certain aunts look at nieces they have already decided are going to be a disappointment. "Ride her," Cormac said. "I'll take Bishop." Bishop was a large, disagreeable roan gelding who was already glaring at the mule. "You've ridden before." "Twice. Both times on flat ground." "Yes. That's what I thought." He handed her a pair of heavy work gloves without asking whether she wanted them. She took them. She put them on. They swallowed her hands entirely. Her fingers barely reached the second knuckle. She did not comment. Neither did he. They rode out of Caldwell Crossing as the snow started coming down in earnest. The first hour was manageable. The trail followed the bottom of the gorge, and the pines on either side broke most of the wind. Cormac rode ahead. Marigold followed on Petunia. She did not speak. She had made a decision on the train that she was not going to be the kind of woman who filled silence out of nervousness. She had spent 4 years learning how to sit inside her own quiet. She was not going to unlearn it now. Cormac appreciated it. He did not say so. The switchback came at the start of the second hour. The trail turned upward, and the gorge fell away to the east, and Petunia went uncertain under her. "Stay close to the wall," Cormac said, slowing until they came alongside. "Don't look down." "I know what don't look down means." He looked at her. "You've been on a switchback before." "No, but I understand the phrase." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. They rode on. 20 minutes later, Petunia stepped on ice. It happened the way mule trouble happens, fast, both front hooves going sideways, the recovery, throwing Marigold hard to the right, her body pitching over open air, a 20-foot drop below her, her hand shooting out for the saddle horn and missing. She grabbed for Petunia's neck, both hands, full weight. Cormac was already turning, Bishop already moving. He came in on the uphill side, got a hand on her left arm, and pulled. She came back into the saddle with a sound that was not quite a word. Petunia planted all 4 feet and stood still. The wind came through and stopped, and came through again. For the count of 3, nobody moved. Then Marigold spoke. "My heart," she said, "is trying to leave my body." Cormac looked at her. "But I do not believe anything is broken." He almost laughed. He didn't. But almost. That was when he saw the pencil. It had come out of her inner coat pocket during the slip. It was lying now against the strap of her saddle, held there by the pressure of her body pressed against Petunia's neck. A small, silver, mechanical pencil. Not the kind of thing a farm girl would carry. Not the kind of thing anyone in this country would carry. On the barrel of the pencil, engraved in careful script, were 2 letters. T.W. He did not say anything. He reached across. He picked it up. He looked at the letters. She was still trying to catch her breath. She had not seen him take it. He tucked it into his own coat pocket, deep against his ribs, where it would not fall out. "We'll walk the last half-mile," he said. "Lead Petunia." "All right." She dismounted. Her legs shook once. She locked her knees. She did not fall. They walked. He did not ask her about the pencil. Not yet. The cabin came into view at the end of the 3rd hour. It sat in a small flat clearing between 2 ridge lines, low to the ground, steep-pitched roof, solid, barn to the north, wood piles stacked tall along the east wall. Marigold stopped when she saw it, just stopped. Cormac looked back. "You all right?" She nodded. She could not speak yet, because when she saw that cabin sitting there in the last light of a January afternoon, something inside her that had been held at a very specific tension for 4 years, released. Just a little, just enough. She had made it. She was here. He was not going to find her here. She started walking again. Cormac watched her for 1 more second, then he turned and led Bishop toward the barn. Inside the cabin was warmer than she had expected. Not warm, but warmer. A cast iron stove in the center. Coals still red from the morning. Rough table, 2 chairs, a sleeping area partitioned off by a wool curtain. He came in behind her. "Sleeping area is yours," he said. "I'll take the floor by the stove." She turned. "This is your home." Was. Cormac. Now it's ours. She looked at him. She did not know what to do with the word ours. Nobody had used a word like that about her in a very long time. "Thank you." He nodded. He went back outside to see to the animals. She stood alone in the middle of the cabin for a long moment. Then she walked to the table, set down her satchel, opened it, took out the small leather book, held it in both hands. 8 months of copying, 6 months of mailing pieces to Chicago, 2 years of watching Ambrose Thorncroft build his empire on ledger lies. She pressed the book against her forehead just for a second. Then she walked behind the curtain. She lifted the mattress. She slid the book beneath it, flat against the ropes. She let the mattress fall. She stood up. She breathed out. She had done it. She was here. That was the first day. The first week was a series of small wars. She lost most of them. She lost to the axe. She could split kindling, but she could not split the frozen rounds of hard pine that Cormac stacked by the door. The first day she tried, the axe head bounced off and nearly took her shin. She stared at it for a long time. Then she picked it up and tried again. By day 3, she had figured out that the angle mattered more than the strength. 20 degrees off the grain. She started making progress. She lost to the bread. The stove ran hotter than any oven she had used, and the first 2 loaves were black on the bottom before she smelled anything. She scraped the char off with a knife. Cormac ate the ruined bread without comment. That night she sat by the stove and studied the way the coals shifted when she moved the damper. She learned it the way she had once learned double-entry bookkeeping, slowly, methodically, without pride. She lost to the water. The creek ran cold and hard, and pulling buckets up through hip-deep snow was a kind of work her body was not built for. The first time she did it alone, she came back to the cabin shaking. She sat down at the table without taking off her coat and could not speak for 10 minutes. Cormac saw. He said nothing. He built the fire hotter. He put water on to warm. He put a tin cup of it in front of her. When she could speak, she said, "Thank you." He said, "Rest a minute." That was all. She rested a minute, then she got up and went back out to finish the wood. He watched her go. Something in his chest moved. He did not know what to call it. He did not try. He named the animals for her on the second morning. 2 milk cows, Beatrice and Cleora. Beatrice hates having her left ear touched. Cleora wants the stanchion cleaned before she'll let down. 4 sheep. The black one is Peggy. She's older. She favors her right leg in cold weather. Old injury. 6 chickens in the back corner. They lay about 4 eggs a day between them in winter. The horses, you know, and the mule. Petunia. Petunia. Petunia and I have an understanding, Marigold said. It's that I do not trust her, and she does not trust me, and we live our lives with that clearly established. He looked at her. "Yeah," he said. "That's about right for a mule." The first time he saw her smile was that morning, in the barn. She was leaning against Cleora's stanchion, her breath coming out white in the cold, her hair coming loose from its braid the way it did about 6 times a day now. The smile was small. It was the kind of smile a person allows themselves when they think nobody is watching. He was watching. He looked away before she could catch him. He did not know what to do with the fact that he had looked away. The 5th day she came to find him at the barn while he was mending harness. She said, "I want to show you something." And she led him to the woodpile, where 2 full rows of the hard pine rounds she had been failing at for 3 days were now split, stacked, even. She stood back. She did not say she had done it. He looked at the stack. He looked at her. "That will last us 8 days, he said. 9, I measured. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. He went back to the harness. She went back to whatever she had been doing before. The silence between them was a different quality now than it had been on the first day. Something in it had begun to hum. On the 10th night, the temperature dropped below anything the thermometer on the porch could register. Not cold, just cold enough to become a different kind of thing. The water in the barrel inside the door froze solid despite the fire. The latch iced in the casing. One of the sheep started coughing. Cormac went out twice in the night to check the barn. On his second return, just before 3 in the morning, he found her sitting at the table, coat over her nightgown, candle lit, writing in a small book. She looked up without surprise when he came in. "Peggy's cough is probably not serious," she said, "but I want to be sure by morning. You heard her from here, when the wind dropped." He looked at her in the candlelight. She had been awake a while, not restless awake, thinking awake. "What are you writing?" A pause. Just a beat, just long enough to notice. "Notes," she said, "about the animals, what I've observed, what still confuses me." He nodded. "Notes. I find it helps." He poured himself a cup of water from the pan by the stove. The liquid still there, barely. He stood for a moment. He was going to ask her about the pencil. He didn't. He said, "Marigold." "Yes." "You have lived here almost 2 weeks." "Yes." "And you have not asked me why I live alone." She set her pen down. She looked at him. "I have been trying to earn the right to ask." He looked at the water in his cup. "You have earned it." She waited. "My wife," and he said with prudence. "Fever winter of 73, she was 28. I am sorry. So am I." "How long did you know her?" 6 years. "That is a long time to know somebody." "Yes." "And a long time to be without them." "Yes." He looked at the candle. "I have not said her name out loud in 9 years. She said, "You said it just now." He looked at her. He said, "Yes, I did." He set the cup down. He went back to his bedroll. He lay there in the dark and listened to the scratch of her pen, and the sound of the stove ticking, and the wind coming down from the pass in long, low waves, and he thought about the letters on the barrel of that silver pencil. TW. He did not know what TW stood for, but he knew it was not the letters of a woman who kept chickens with her aunt in Boston. He turned onto his side. He looked at the curtain. He saw the yellow line of her candle underneath it. She was still writing. He closed his eyes. The first time she laughed in front of him was an accident. It was the 13th day. He had been coming in from the barn with the morning milk. The top of the bucket had iced over slightly. He hit the threshold wrong. The bucket swung. He nearly wore most of a morning's milk down the front of his coat. He caught it with a lurch. He did not fall, but it was close. He looked up. She was standing at the stove. She had one hand pressed against her mouth, trying very hard. Then she lost. She laughed, bright, short, completely uncontrolled. The sound filled the cabin the way a window opened in April fills a room with air you did not know you were missing. She caught herself. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's fine. I shouldn't have. A man nearly wearing his own milk is not a tragedy." She looked at him. "You're not offended?" "Marigold." "Yes." "No." He set the bucket down. He started straining the milk. She watched him a moment longer. He saw her reflection in the dark window glass. She was smiling, the kind of smile a person doesn't know she's making, which is the best kind. She was looking at his back, and she was smiling. He kept his eyes on the milk. He did not turn around, because if he had turned around, he would have had to see her seeing him, and he was not ready, not yet. The storm came on the 20th day and did not stop for 36 hours. They were confined to the cabin and the necessary trips to the barn. He strung a rope between the two buildings on the first morning because in true whiteout you could get turned around in your own yard. Inside, they managed the small space around each other. He repaired equipment, she cataloged the stores, she found a crack in the north wall's chinking that had opened from freeze-thaw and packed it with fresh material from the bucket he kept for the purpose, working carefully. The way a person works when she has been shown a thing once and remembered it exactly. On the second evening of the storm, with the wind pressing against the walls and the lamplight making the cabin feel smaller, she looked up from her mending. "Tell me about the trap lines." He looked up. "I want to understand what you do," she said. "When you're gone in the mornings, where you go, how the routes work. Why? In case something happens. In case something happens. In case something happens." He got up, he went to a shelf, he came back with a piece of paper bag, he drew her a rough map, 4 routes, the creek runs, the ridge crossings, where the trail was tricky in fresh snow, where the beaver were still active, where he had marked the territorial boundaries with the neighboring trapper down the valley. She listened without interrupting. She asked 2 questions. The first was about how he marked the boundaries. The second was about timing, whether the best catch came early or late in the season. He looked at her. Nobody had ever asked him that second question. "Early," he said. "October and November, before they settle." "So the season is mostly done." "Mostly. I run them through January for what's left." She nodded. Slowly. She looked at the map for a long moment. Then she said, "And the income from this." He waited. She caught herself. "That's not my business." "It is your business." "Cormac, you live here now?" She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "I suppose I do." He told her about the trapping and the trade goods and the cattle he had been building for 6 years and the plan for next year's herd if the summer was good. She was quiet for a long moment when he finished. Then she said, "That's a real plan for the future." "I've been alone a while, but I've never been without a plan." Something moved through her face. Something complicated. He could not name it. "That's a good quality," she said quietly. He looked at her across the table. This woman who had ridden a mule up a mountain trail in a January blizzard, who had split pine rounds in temperatures that would have sent most men indoors, who slept in a stranger's house, who got up before dawn, who was still, he was increasingly certain, keeping something from him. He did not push. He said, "Get some rest." She stood. "You too." Which was new. She had not told him what to do before. Small thing, but small things added up. She went behind the curtain. He banked the fire. He lay down. The wind pressed against the walls. He did not sleep for a while. The wolves came on the 23rd day. He had left later than usual. One of the cow's milk had been off that morning, and he had spent an extra hour watching Cleora before deciding it was nothing serious, which meant he was not on the trap line until almost 9, which meant he was not back at the cabin at his usual hour. He was 2 miles out when he heard it. A single shot. A rifle, not a mistake, not a hunter. A single deliberate shot fired from the direction of the clearing. He pushed Bishop hard. Every mile of that ride he did arithmetic he did not want to be doing. He came into the clearing at a full gallop. He saw the barn door hanging open. He saw Marigold standing 10 feet from it, his Winchester in her hands, barrel angled downward, whole body rigid. Alive, alive, she was standing. He pulled Bishop up. He was off the horse before Bishop had fully stopped. "Are you hurt?" "No." Her voice was flat. Not calm. Flat. He looked at the ground. Tracks. Wolf tracks. Coming out of the tree line. Big ones. At least 5 sets. And the disturbance where the pack had circled the barn. But no wolf. No body. He looked at her. "You didn't hit one?" "No." "You fired the warning?" "Yes." He walked to the barn. The cows were pressed to the far wall, the sheep were bunched. Petunia had kicked a stall board but was standing. The chickens were in uproar, all alive. He came back out. Marigold had not moved. The rifle was still in her hands, held now the way you hold something you have forgotten you're holding. "Safety on," he said. She looked down, found the mechanism, clicked it. "Give it here." She handed it to him. When it left her hands, something in her posture changed, a slow decompression, a wire that had been strung too tight finally slackening. She pressed her palms flat against her coat to hold them still. "There were 5 of them," she said. "I counted the tracks when they came to the tree line. I heard the animals. I looked out." She stopped. "I took the rifle from the wall. I knew where it was." "Since when?" She looked at him. "Since the first week." He looked at her. "You've been ready." Since the first week. For something, yes. Not just wolves. She did not answer. She looked back at the wood line. They ran when I fired. I didn't know if they would, but they did. He said, "You've never fired a rifle before." No. How did you know what to do? She was quiet. I've seen it done. I've watched. I knew the mechanics. I just did not know if I could hold steady enough. Another pause. I did not aim at the wolf. I aimed at the ground 20 feet in front of him because I did not trust myself to hit if I aimed at him. She looked at him. I was terrified, Cormac. I know. I've been terrified since the day I stepped off that train. He looked at her. He looked at her a very long time. Then he walked to Bishop. He tied him at the post. He walked past her into the cabin. She followed. Inside, he went to the stove. He poured coffee. He set 2 cups on the table. He sat down. He reached into his coat. He took out the silver pencil. He set it between them on the table. She looked at it. She did not touch it. The 2 letters were pointing at her. TW. He said, "I've been carrying this since the switchback, the day you came up the mountain." She nodded. "I know. You saw me pick it up. I saw you not ask me about it." He looked at her. "I told you I would wait. I told you that." "You did. But tonight, after what happened in that yard, I need to tell you something." She waited. "Marigold." "Yes. I don't need to know all of it tonight. I don't. If you need more time, take it." She looked at him. "But whatever it is," he tapped the pencil, "whenever you're ready to tell me." He looked her in the eye. "I will listen, and I will not run, and I will not turn you over to anyone for any reason." The wind came up against the west wall. She looked at the pencil. She looked at him. She reached across the table. She picked up the pencil. She held it for a moment. Then she set it back down, closer to her side. She kept her hand on it. "Cormac," she said. "Yes. I need 1 more week. Then I will tell you everything. All of it." He nodded. 1 more week. He picked up his coffee. They sat in the warmth of the stove. Outside, the dark settled over the mountains. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Something in the silence had changed, not quite together, but no longer separate. The week began the way most weeks in that country began. Cold, slow, full of small chores that had to be done whether or not the people doing them had anything else on their minds. Marigold had the pencil now. She kept it in the pocket of her apron during the day. She set it on the bedside crate at night. She did not hide it. She did not carry it like a secret. She carried it like a fact. Cormac saw. He did not comment. But something had changed in the shape of the cabin, the way a room changes when someone stops pretending, the 24th day. She was at the stove making biscuits from scratch, not from memory, from a paper card she had taken out of her satchel, her handwriting on it, careful, small, the recipe of a woman who had watched other women bake and had written down what she saw. Cormac came in from the barn. He watched her from the door. She did not turn. "Cormac." "Yes." "How do you know when the stove is at the right temperature?" "You put your hand in above the lid, count. If you get to 5 without pulling back, it's too cool. If you can't get to 2, too hot. Between 2 and 5. Between 2 and 5. She put her hand in above the lid. She counted. 3. "That's biscuit heat." She looked back at him. Her hair had come loose from the braid again. Gold against her collar. She did not fix it. She was learning his mannerisms. That was the frightening thing. She was learning his mannerisms. The 26th day, he came in from the barn with the morning milk. The top of the bucket had iced over. He hit the threshold wrong. The bucket swung. He recovered. Marigold at the stove did not even look up. "Milk stays in the bucket this morning." "It does. Progress." "Marigold." "Yes. You are getting insolent." She turned. Her eyes were bright. "I learned it from you. I do not have that particular quality. You have precisely that particular quality." He set the bucket down. He looked at her for 1 second longer than a man should look at his wife across a kitchen when the wife is holding a wooden spoon and the man is holding a bucket of half-frozen milk. Then he went back outside to check the barn latch he had already checked, because he needed the cold air. Because the cabin had suddenly gotten small. Because his chest was doing something it had not done in 12 years. The wind hit him at the porch. He stood there for a long moment. He breathed out. He had not almost smiled at another human being in a very long time. The 28th day. She was outside splitting kindling. She was better at it now. Not good, but better. The wedge angle, the weight of the maul. Her body had begun to know things her mind still did not remember teaching it. She stopped mid-swing. She lowered the maul. She looked toward the east. Cormac was crossing the yard from the barn. He saw her stop. He saw her look. She looked east, toward Denver, toward the low country, toward the place she had come from. For a long moment. Then she picked up the maul. She went back to work. He watched her a second longer. He thought, she is counting the days. She is counting the days until she has to tell me. The 30th day. Cormac had ridden down to the trap line, the far one, the one that took him 6 hours in this weather. Marigold was alone. She sat at the table for a long time with a piece of paper and a pen. She wrote a letter. She sealed it. She addressed it to a name and a town. The name was Theodore Havelock. The town was Pueblo. She did not put a return address. She heard the sound of hooves. Not Cormac. Different rhythm. She stood up. She went to the door. Ned Odell was riding into the yard on a mule half a hand shorter than he was. Ned was 14. He had the particular gangly build of a boy whose body had grown faster than his coordination. He wore a coat that had been his father's and was still too big for him. He tipped his hat. "Mrs. Haverford, ma'am." "Ned. Pa sent me up with the flour and the coffee your husband asked for." "Thank you. Bring it in and warm yourself. There's coffee on." He came in. He set the sack down. He warmed his hands at the stove and looked around the cabin with the frank curiosity of a boy who had never been inside it before. Marigold got him coffee. He drank it. She said, "Ned." "Ma'am, when you ride back down, will you pass through Caldwell Crossing?" "Yes, ma'am." Pa said, "Stop at the Mercantile." "I have a letter." She took it out of her apron pocket. She set it on the table between them. "I need it to go on the next train south. I need it to reach the man whose name is on it, and I need you not to mention it to anyone, not the mercantile clerk, not Mr. Pembridge at the depot, not your father." Ned looked at the letter. He looked at her. He was 14. He was not stupid. "Ma'am, is this trouble?" "It might be, for you." "Yes." He looked at her. She had expected him to hesitate. He didn't. He picked up the letter. He tucked it inside his coat, deep, against his ribs, where it would not fall out. "Ma'am." "Yes, Ned. My mother says you're the first woman who has come up to this cabin who wasn't Mr. Haverford's Prudence." She looked at him. "That's true, Ned." "She says Mr. Haverford is a good man." "He is. So if you're in trouble—" Ned paused. He was working out his sentence. "I'll get the letter where it needs to go, and I won't say." She looked at this 14-year-old boy standing in her kitchen with a letter that could shift the shape of the West against his ribs. "Thank you, Ned." "Ma'am." He tipped his hat. He went back to the mule. She watched him ride out of the yard. She stood there a long time after he was gone. She thought, "I have just used a child." She thought, he knew what I was asking. She thought, that is worse. She went back inside. She sat at the table. She put her face in her hands. For a full minute, no longer. Then she got up and started supper. Cormac came back at dusk. He unsaddled Bishop. He came in stamping snow off his boots. He looked at her, something in her face. "You all right?" "Yes." "Sure." "Yes, Cormac." He looked at her a second longer. He hung his coat. He did not press. But that night after they had eaten, he said, "I saw fresh mule tracks in the yard." Ned rode up with the supplies. "Ah." He nodded. That was all he said. She looked at him across the table. She thought, he knows. She thought, he knows I sent a letter. He knows, and he is not asking. She thought, I have never in my life been trusted like this. She looked at her plate. She said, "Cormac." "Yes." 3 more days." "All right. I need 3 more days. Then I will tell you." "All right." He got up. He cleared the table. He did not look at her, because if he had looked at her, she would have seen what his face was doing. The 38th day, she had planned to tell him that morning. She had rehearsed it in her head. For 2 nights, she had a way she was going to begin. She had picked the sentence. She had chosen where he would be sitting. She was going to say, "Cormac, I need to tell you what I brought to your door." That was the sentence. She was going to say it after breakfast, when the light was good, when the cabin was warm, when his hands were free of chores. That was the plan. She did not get to use the plan. Because at 8:15 in the morning, while she was still frying salt pork, she heard the sound of hooves. Not 1 horse, 2, not Ned Odell's mule, larger, heavier, well-fed, well-shod, not from around here. She froze at the stove. Cormac was at the table, lacing his boots. His head came up. He looked at her. He did not need to ask. He was already moving. He was at the wall taking down the rifle before she could say anything. Except she said one word. She said, "Cormac." He turned. "What?" "Whatever happens." "Yes." "I am sorry." He looked at her. He said, "Don't be sorry yet." He walked to the door. He opened it a hand's width. He looked out. Two horses, a tall bay and a dark chestnut, both animals wearing gear that came from somewhere with money. Two men, one dismounting, one still on his horse. The one dismounting wore a long gray duster. He had dust on the coat despite the snow, which meant he had come up from the lower elevations, which meant Caldwell Crossing, which meant the eastbound train, a badge on his breast, Federal. The other man sat his horse with the particular stillness of instruction, a rifle across his saddle. Cormac closed the door. He turned. Marigold had not moved from the stove. The salt pork was starting to burn. She was not looking at it. She was looking at him. He said, "Federal." "I know." "Who?" "Ellery Osgood." "You know his name?" "Yes." "How?" She looked at him. "Cormac." "How Marigold?" "He was my father's roommate at Yale." His breath went out of him. Just once. He nodded, slow. He said, "Take the pork off the fire." She took the pork off the fire. He said, "Sit down at the table." She sat. He said, "I'll bring him in. You will speak first. Whatever you say, I will follow your lead. Do you understand me?" "Yes." "Marigold." "Yes." "You have not been alone in this since the day you came up that mountain." She looked at him. Her eyes stung. She did not cry. She nodded. He opened the door. He said, "Come in out of the cold, gentlemen." Ellery Osgood was 45 years old. He had a narrow face, sharp cheekbones, pale eyes that sat close together and moved in the cataloging way of a man who had been paid to notice things for 20 years. Gray at his temples, his mouth had probably stopped smiling in 1878. He held his hat in his hand when he stepped inside, which was the first thing. He held his hat in his hand. He looked at Marigold sitting at the table. He said, "Goldie." He said it quietly. The name landed in the cabin like a coin dropped on a wooden floor. Cormac heard it. Cormac's whole body registered it. Marigold did not move. She said, "Ellery." He said, "You cut your hair 2 years ago. It suits you. You have not aged well. I am aware." The second man had come in behind him. Osgood turned. "Wait outside, Sturgis." "Sir?" I said, "Wait outside." Sturgis went outside. Osgood closed the door. He turned back to the table. He looked at Cormac. He looked at the rifle in Cormac's hand. He said, "Mr. Haverford." "Mr. Osgood, I would prefer to have this conversation without a weapon between us." "I would prefer many things, Mr. Osgood." They looked at each other. Then Cormac lowered the rifle. He did not put it away. He set it against the wall, within reach. Osgood nodded. He pulled out the third chair. He sat down. He looked at Marigold across the table. He said, "Your father." She said, "Do not." He said, "Goldie." She said, "Do not say his name to me until I know why you are in my kitchen." He looked at her. Something broke in his face. Just for a second. Then he pulled it back together. He said, "I work for the Federal Investigations Bureau, out of the Denver office." "I know who you work for." "Officially. Unofficially, you work for Ambrose Thorncroft." The room went still. Cormac watched Osgood's face. Osgood did not deny it. He said, "It is more complicated than that, Goldie." She said, "It always is." He said, "My son." She stopped. She looked at him. She said, "Which son?" "Wallace." "How old is Wallace now?" 7. She waited. "He is sick." "Sick with what?" "Consumption." "How long?" 14 months. She looked at him. She said, "How much is Thorncroft paying for his sanatorium?" Osgood did not answer at first. Then he said, "All of it." She closed her eyes. Just for a moment. She opened them. She said, "Ellery, Goldie, you came up this mountain to take a book from me because a rich man owns your son's medicine." "Yes." "That is what you are telling me." "Yes." Cormac had not spoken. He was watching this like a man watching a boiler pressure gauge. Marigold looked at him. Just a glance. Just to check. He nodded once. She turned back to Osgood. She said, "Tell me the truth about my father." "Goldie." "Tell me." He did not do it. The cabin went silent. Utterly silent. The wind outside had stopped for a moment. The stove ticked. Marigold sat completely still. She said, "What?" Osgood said, "Your father did not kill himself. He was killed in his office. Thorncroft's men, made to look like suicide. I have known since 10 days after he died. I have been gathering evidence for 4 years. I have 3 witness statements. I have the original coroner's memorandum before the second one was written. I have his real will. It was not the letter your aunt received." He reached into his coat. He set a wooden box on the table. Small, latched, dark wood. He slid it across. He said, "This is yours. It has been yours since the day he died. I could not get it to you until I could get it to you safely." Marigold looked at the box. She did not touch it. Her hands were on the table, palm down. She pressed them flat to hold them still. She was doing what she had done at her father's grave 4 years ago. She was making a decision about how much she was going to allow. She said, "Why now, Ellery?" "Because I could not stop them sending me up here to take your book, so I came, and I made a decision on the ride up, that I was going to make my choice today, and this is my choice." He looked at Cormac. He said, "Mr. Haverford, I need to ask something." "Ask. I need 3 days." Cormac said, "For what?" "For me to ride to Chicago. There is a journalist there. His name is Hamilton Rusk. If I can reach him in 3 days, I can add my file to what he already has, which I believe your wife has already been sending him." Marigold looked up. She said, "How do you know about Hamilton Rusk?" Osgood said, "Because I have been reading your mail for 6 months." She stared at him. He said, "I was assigned to. That was my job. I read your mail, and I did not report what was in it. And I let the packages continue to Chicago, every one of them. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" She was still looking at him. She said, "You have been protecting me." "I have been trying to. For 6 months. Yes. Since before I ran. Since your father died, Goldie, I have been trying to for 4 years." She closed her eyes. She kept them closed for a long time. Cormac watched her the way a man watches a boat coming into a harbor. When she opened her eyes, she was calm again. She said, 3 days. 3 days. And then I turn in my badge and I testify, and whatever Thorncroft does after that, he does." Cormac said, "Your son." Osgood said, "There is a doctor in New York. He does not know I have contacted him, but I have. He said if we can get Wallace East, he will treat him, free of charge. He is the son of a man I served with in the war. I did not want to use that debt, but I will." Cormac nodded, slowly. He said, 3 days. Osgood said, 3 days. Cormac said, "Mr. Osgood." "Yes. If you are lying, if any part of what you just said is not exactly the truth, I will find you. I do not care where you go." Osgood looked at him. He said, "I know Mr. Haverford. I've been noticing you the whole time I've been in this room." He stood. He picked up his hat. He said, "Goldie." She did not answer. He said, "Read the will." He went outside. She heard him mount his horse. She heard him say something short to Sturgis. She heard the two of them ride out of the yard. She sat at the table looking at the wooden box for a long time. Cormac did not move. He was giving her the moment. Finally, she reached out. She unlatched the box. She opened the lid. Inside were papers, layers of them. A coroner's memorandum, 3 folded witness statements, a ribbon-tied bundle, and on top, a single sealed envelope with her name written on the front in a handwriting she had not seen in 4 years. She lifted the envelope. She held it in both hands. She did not open it. She looked at Cormac. She said, "Not yet." He said, "No." She said, "Later." He said, "Whenever." She set the envelope back in the box. She closed the lid. She latched it. She pushed the box 6 inches away from herself on the table. She said, "Cormac." "Yes." "I need to tell you." "I know," she told him. She told him about the Thorncroft Western Railway, where she had worked 2 years. Ledger accountant, full access, because a woman was considered unthreatening. She told him about the payments, 12 surveyors, 9 years, 400,000 acres, payments routing through 3 shell accounts back to a private fund of Ambrose Thorncroft's. She told him about the 2 federal names in the ledger, a land office superintendent, a junior senator from Colorado, Senator Mordecai Finch. She told him she had copied everything, 8 months of copying. She had begun mailing pieces to Hamilton Rusk in Chicago 6 months ago, in small packets, different postmasters, different weeks. She told him the leather book under the mattress was not the whole evidence. It was the last piece. The 3 names Thorncroft did not know she had. If Thorncroft got the book back, he could destroy the corroborating evidence in 3 offices before it could be pulled. If she got the book to Judge Owen Broderick in Santa Fe in the next 4 days, it was over for him. She told him about her father, the bank, the forced foreclosure, the office, the morning, the letter her aunt received. She said, I have believed for 4 years that my father took his own life because a rich man broke him. She said, I came up this mountain to finish what he could not. She said, that is who I am, Cormac. She said, I am sorry I did not tell you sooner. He had not moved through any of it. He had not looked away. When she was done, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Marigold, yes, I want to say something and I want you to hear it exactly as I mean it. All right. Those settlers, yes, they deserve their land, yes, and you are the only person alive who can give it back to them. She looked at him. He said, I am not helping you because I am your husband. I am helping you because if I do not help you, and those families do not get what is theirs, I will not be able to look at myself in this cabin for the rest of my life. She said, Cormac. He said, but, I am also helping you. He said it without ornamentation, the way he said most things. She looked at him. She said, you have known who I was for 2 weeks. He said, longer than that, Marigold. How long? About the day you split those pine rounds. She almost laughed. She didn't, but almost. She said, so what do we do? He said, we think about this. He got up. He put fresh coffee on. They thought about it. They talked for 2 hours. They agreed the eastbound train from Caldwell Crossing was watched. They agreed Osgood was probably being followed himself. They agreed that even if Osgood made it to Chicago, the book still had to reach Judge Broderick separately. Because 2 sources of evidence in 2 different cities meant Thorncroft could not shut down the case in one move. Cormac said, Osgood will not be enough. Marigold said, why? He said, because Thorncroft does not trust him. He sent Osgood up here as a test. He is watching to see if the book comes back. If it does not come back in 3 days, he will not wait. He will send others, before Osgood even reaches Chicago. She said, you are right. She said, there is one person in Caldwell Crossing who can move the book. He said, who? She said, Horace Pembridge. He said, the station master. She said, yes. Why him? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, 10 years ago, Thorncroft Western pushed a rail line through a homestead in the San Luis Valley. Not on the survey, just across it. They ran the line at midnight. The homesteader tried to stand in front of it. His wife was in the cabin. The cabin was in the right-of-way Thorncroft had claimed. They tore the cabin down. She was hit. She died 2 days later. The homesteader took a job as far away from that valley as he could get. Cormac said, Pembridge. She said, Pembridge. He said, you knew when you came up this mountain. I have written to him 4 times, through a friend of my aunt's. Nothing in his own name. He does not know for certain who I am, but I think he suspects. I saw him look at me at the depot. On our wedding day, he looked at me like he knew. Cormac remembered. He remembered Pembridge lingering at the doorway. He remembered Pembridge touching his hat. He said, yes, he knew. She said, the book can travel 2 ways at once, through Pembridge and through Osgood. If either path fails, the other still gets there. He said, Ned. Ned Odell. You will send the book with Ned. He will not be alone. Cormac looked at her. Who? She looked at him. She said, there is one more thing I have not told you. He said, Marigold. There is one more thing. All right. She said, I have a brother. He said, I did not know that. She said, half-brother, 22, Theodore, Theo, my father's son from before he married my mother. My father sent him money every month. My aunt never knew. He is a horsebreaker in Pueblo. He is the person I wrote to through Ned Odell 2 weeks ago. He is waiting for a signal. Cormac said, what is the signal? A telegram from Pembridge. 2 words. Send Theo. Cormac closed his eyes for 1 full second. He opened them. He said, you planned this. Yes. From when? From the day I sat down at Ambrose Thorncroft's ledger 2 years ago. He looked at her. He said, Marigold Havelock. Yes. You are the most terrifying human being I have ever met. She said, that is very possibly a compliment. He said, it is. That evening, after they had finished planning, after they had eaten, after the fire was low, she took the wooden box. She sat by the stove. She opened the box. She took out the sealed envelope. She looked at Cormac. He said, do you want me to leave? She said, no. He stayed. She broke the seal. She unfolded the paper. She read. Her father's handwriting she read. When she was done, she folded the paper. She held it against her chest. She did not cry hard. 2 tears, only 2. She said, he wrote. Cormac waited. She said, he wrote, Marigold, if you are reading this, it means I have failed. But you have not. You still have time. Do not let them define you as the daughter of a man who took his own life. You are the daughter of a man who tried. She stopped. She looked at the fire. She said, "For 4 years I have believed I was the first thing." Cormac said, "You were never the first thing." She said, "I know that now." She kept the paper against her chest, which was, she thought, the best gift her father had ever given her, proof he had not chosen to leave. Cormac reached across the space between them. He put his hand over her hand. That was all. He did not say more. But he did that, which was new, which was the exact thing. The 41st day, just before dawn. Cormac stepped out onto the porch to check the sky. Old habit. He liked to know the weather before Marigold woke. He looked east. He saw the light. Not moonlight, not snow reflection. Lanterns, moving, organized, spread across the eastern ridge in a pattern he had seen once before in his life, which was in the war. He counted 4 lights, maybe 5. Somebody had brought men up in the night. Somebody had not waited 3 days. He turned back to the door. He went inside. Marigold was already sitting up on the edge of the bed. She had heard him stop moving on the porch. She said, "How many?" He said, "At least 4, maybe more on the south approach." She said, "It is not Ellery." He said, "No, it is not Ellery." She said, "Thorncroft did not wait." He said, "Thorncroft did not wait." She stood up. She was already dressed, because she had been dressed for hours, because she had not slept, because some part of her had been waiting for this sound since the day she stepped off that train. She reached under the mattress. She pulled out the leather book. She tucked it inside her coat, against her ribs, where it would not fall out. She looked at Cormac. She said, "Ned." He said, "West Gully." She said, "Bishop is at the barn." He said, "Bishop stays. You go on foot through the gully, faster in the dark." She said, "You are not coming with me." He said, "I am buying you time." She said, "Cormac." He said, "Marigold." She said, "Do not die in this yard." He looked at her. He said, "I have no such intention." She looked at him. She reached up. She put her cold hand against the side of his face. Just for a second, she said, "Come find me." He said, "I will." She went out the back door of the cabin, through the barn, into the west gully, into the dark. He watched her disappear. Then he turned back. He walked to the corner of the cabin. He set the blasting charges he used for stump clearing, 3 of them, along the front wall. He measured the fuse. He went to the east window. He waited, somewhere on the ridge. Someone stepped on a branch. The sound carried. He closed his eyes. He opened them. He said out loud to no one, "All right." He said, "Let's see how much time I can buy." The first fuse burned for 90 seconds. Cormac counted them the way a man counts steps in a dark room. He was crouched behind the east wall, rifle across his knees, pistol on his hip, the lamp he had lit as a decoy still burning in the front corner. He listened. Boots on frozen ground. 2 men working their way to the south side. Another 2 on the east. Someone shouting orders that were trying not to sound like orders. Ambrose Thorncroft had sent professionals, which meant Ambrose Thorncroft was afraid, which was correct. 90. The front foundation blew out. Not the roof, not the walls, just the base of the front wall where the foundation stones met the earth. The concussion came through the interior like a hand slapping a table. The lamp jumped. A section of the north window's shutter dropped off the wall. Somebody outside shouted an actual word. Cormac was already moving. He was through the interior barn door before the second charge went. That charge came 90 seconds later and blew the east window frame out entirely and sent the shutter spinning into the clearing. Petunia looked at him. The look she gave him said, "I have opinions." He said, "Not now, Petunia." He went out the back door of the barn, low, west, because Marigold had gone west 45 minutes ago. Because he was going to circle north through the trees and come back down the ridge to the Odell place from a direction they would not be watching. Because if he ran straight after her, he would lead them straight to her, which he would not do. The front of the cabin caught fire. He heard it as he entered the trees, the lamp, the dry chinking. He did not stop. He did not look back, because a cabin was a cabin, and Marigold was Marigold. Marigold reached the Odell yard at the point in the morning where the sky was still not quite deciding whether to become blue. She came out of the west gully with snow to her knees. Her coat was open. Her hair was down, gold against the dark wool of her collar. Her cheeks had 2 red marks on them that were not embarrassment. The Odell dog barked once. Jeremiah Odell was on the porch already, coat on, rifle in the crook of his arm. Not aimed, just present. He saw her. He set the rifle down. He said, "Ma'am." She said, "Ned." He said, "Ned is inside." She said, "Jeremiah." He said, "Come inside, Marigold." That was the first time he had used her given name. She went inside. Mabel Odell was at the stove. She had biscuits in the oven, which was the kind of thing that only makes sense if you understand that women in that country baked when they did not know what else to do. Ned was at the table, and there was another man at the table. He stood up when she came in. He was 22, tall, slim through the shoulders, sandy hair cut too short. He wore a horsebreaker's coat. His hands were rough in the way of a man who spent his days working ropes. He had her father's eyes. Not exactly, just the shape, the way they sat in the skull. She stopped at the door. She said Theo. He said Goldie. She had not seen him in 4 years. She had known him for exactly 9 days in her life. She had gone to Pueblo once. Their father had introduced them, her half-brother, her father's other family. Their father had asked her to keep the secret. She had. Then their father had died. Then Theo had disappeared into the Pueblo horse country because he did not know what else to do. And then a letter had come to him 3 weeks ago through a 14-year-old boy on a mule. He said, "You look like Mama." She said, "You look like Papa." He said, "You have not answered my last letter." She said, "I could not." He said, "I know." She crossed the room. She hugged him. He hugged her back. She had not been hugged in 8 months. She let it last exactly 3 seconds. Then she stepped back. She said, "You have the book." Ned held up her leather book. He said, "Ma'am, Mrs. Haverford, ma'am, I have it. I have not opened it. Theo has not opened it. Nobody has opened it." She said, "Ned." He said, "Ma'am." She said, "Thank you." He nodded. He looked at the floor. He was 14. He did not know what to do with being thanked by a grown woman. Jeremiah said, "Boys leave in 10 minutes. Marigold said, "Boys." Jeremiah said, "Ned rides with Theo. Theo carries the book. Ned rides with him because Ned knows every switch and hollow on the road to Caldwell Crossing, and Theo does not. They ride together to the depot. They put the book in Horace Pembridge's hands. They come home." She looked at Ned. She looked at Jeremiah. She said, "Jeremiah." He said, "Marigold." She said, "He is 14. He said, "He is 14. He is my son. And he made his own decision about this a week ago when he brought your letter down." She stared at him. She said, "You knew." He said, "I did not know. Ned did not tell me. I saw him tuck a letter into his coat when he came home from your place. I asked him what he was doing. He said Mrs. Haverford asked him to move something quiet. I said, all right. Then I said, Ned, if it comes down to it, you will tell your mother and me, and we will help." She looked at Mabel. Mabel was pulling the biscuits out of the oven, not looking at her. Mabel said, "The women in this valley have been waiting for someone to do what you did for a very long time, Marigold." Then Mabel looked up. Mabel said, "Some of us knew what Thorncroft did to Horace's wife. Some of us have been carrying it. You are not the first person to hate that man in this country. You are just the first person to have the pen for it." Marigold could not answer, because if she had opened her mouth, she would have said something she did not want said in front of a 14-year-old boy about to ride into danger. She just nodded. Then she turned to Theo. She said, "You have not asked me for anything in 4 years." He said, "You did not have anything to give." She said, "I have something now." He said, "I do not want it." She said, "Theo." He said, "I want to help. I do not want the thing." She looked at him. She said, "You are our father's son." He said, "I know." She said, "Ride safe." He said, "You too." They went. Ned tipped his hat to her at the door. Then the door closed. Mabel came over. She put a mug of coffee in front of her. She said, "Sit down." Marigold sat. Mabel said, "He'll come." Marigold said, "Who?" Mabel said, "Your man." Marigold looked at her. Mabel said, "Marigold, he is coming. He has been coming for you since the morning you got on that mule. He is going to walk through that door in the next 2 hours, whether he has to crawl to do it. Now drink the coffee." Marigold drank the coffee. She did not cry, but she came close. She came the closest she had come in 4 years. Cormac came through the door at 10 minutes past 9. His coat was torn at the left elbow. His sleeve was dark with blood from the elbow to the wrist. His face was gray in the way faces get when a man has been running on something other than food. He looked at her. She looked at him. He said, "Marigold." She said, "Cormac." He said, "The boys." She said, "Gone 20 minutes. He said, "Good." Then he sat down at the table. Then he passed out for 4 seconds. Then he came back. Jeremiah was already up. Mabel had bandaging out on the table before Marigold had crossed the room. Marigold took his coat off. The wound was long, not deep. A rifle round had grazed the meat of the forearm, not the artery, not the bone. He was going to be all right. She started cleaning it. Her hands did not shake, which surprised her. Cormac watched her. He said, "Steady hands." She said, "Learned them at a ledger." He almost laughed. He didn't, but almost. Mabel said, "There is a place you can go." Jeremiah said, "The old Ainsley place, South Fork. Ainsley went to his daughter in Pueblo last October. Cabin is empty. Woodpile is stocked. Nobody has been down there since the first snow." Marigold said, "We do not want to bring trouble to your door, Jeremiah." Jeremiah said, "You already brought it. You brought it 4 years ago when Ambrose Thorncroft killed your father. Trouble has been in this yard the whole time. You are the first person to try and take it out." He looked at her. He said, "You go to Ainsley's. You stay there until we send word." She looked at him. She said, "Thank you." He said, "Ma'am." An hour later, she was on Petunia. Cormac was on Bishop. His arm was in a sling under his coat. He rode straight. They rode south. They rode down out of the high country in the last of a January morning that was starting for the first time in 5 weeks to feel like it might not last forever. The Ainsley place was 2 rooms, a lean-to kitchen with a stove that had a warped flue, a rope bed that creaked, a woodpile old Ainsley had been stacking since before the previous winter. Marigold looked at it. She said, 2 rooms. Cormac said, yes. She said, 1 bed. He said, yes. She said, I will sleep on the floor by the stove. He said, Marigold. She said, yes. He said, you have been on the floor by no stove of any kind since the day I met you. She said, I did not sleep on the floor because you gave me the bed. He said, I gave you the bed because you were my wife. She stopped. She looked at him. He had said the word. He had said it without decoration. He had said it the way a man says a temperature. She said, Cormac. He said, yes. She said, I will still take the floor tonight. He said, all right. She said, because if I sleep in that bed tonight, I do not know what will happen. And I'm too tired to decide right now what I want to happen. He said, all right. She said, but not because of you. He said, I know. She said, do you? He said, Marigold, I have known who you were for 2 weeks. I have known what I felt for you for 1. I am not confused. She looked at him. She said, 2 weeks. He said, 2 weeks. She said, since when? He said, since the Pine Rounds. She said, you said that already. He said, because it is still true. She almost laughed. She did not. But her face changed, and he saw it. Late that night, 2 hours before dawn, Ned came down the trail on his mule with a note from his father. Marigold read it by the lamp. The note said, book delivered. Pembridge sent telegram to Chicago at 7 this morning. Thayo left south on the evening train. Boys are home safe. Marigold put the note down on the table. She put her hand over her eyes for the count of 3. Then she lowered her hand. She looked at Cormac. She said, the book got there. He said, it got there. She said, the boys are safe. He said, they are safe. She said, Cormac. He said, yes. She said, I am going to sleep for 8 hours. He said, you are going to sleep for 12. She said, 10, we negotiate. He said, 10. She slept for 11. The first week at the Ainsley place ran on the small chores of a woman who did not know what else to do and a man whose arm was healing slowly. She changed his bandaging every morning. He objected. She ignored him. He stopped objecting. She milked the 1 cow old Ainsley had left in the barn. She fed the 2 chickens. She split what wood needed splitting. She was better at it now than she had been 3 weeks ago. Her body remembered the wedge angle without asking. Her hands were rougher than they had been in November. Her palms had small, pale scars along the outside edges where the axe handle had blistered and healed. She looked at those scars one morning while she was washing her hands in the basin. 6 weeks ago, I did not know I would have hands like these, she thought. I am becoming a person I did not plan to become. I like her. Cormac watched her from the kitchen doorway. He did not say anything, but he watched her. He watched her with an expression that a woman 10 years younger would not have known what to do with. Marigold knew. She dried her hands. She looked at him across the room. She said, Cormac. He said, yes. She said, you are staring. He said, I am. She said, why? He said, because I have not looked at a woman like this in 12 years, and I am checking to see if I remember how. She said, do you remember? He said, I remember. She looked at him. She said, I need 1 more week. He said, Marigold, you have said that before. She said, this time I mean it about a different question. He said, oh. He said, oh. The second time softer than the first. He did not go out to the barn this time. He stayed. He crossed the kitchen. He stopped 1 step away from her. He said, 1 week. She said, 1 week. He said, all right. She said, all right. He did not touch her, but he stayed. And that was the thing that broke something loose in her chest. Not big, not loud, just a small, quiet giving way, like snow deciding in April to begin. The second week began with the news. It came in the form of a young lawyer. Porter Sinclair rode up the Ainsley yard on a hired horse that was tired in the way of horses that have covered 90 miles in 3 days. He was 26 years old. He wore a coat that had been expensive in Santa Fe and was now covered in dust from 3 counties. He had a leather bag over his shoulder. He tied the horse. He knocked on the door. Marigold opened it. He said, Mrs. Haverford. She said, Mr. He said, Porter Sinclair, Junior Counsel, Federal Circuit Court, Santa Fe. She said, come in. He came in. Cormac was at the table. Sinclair sat down. He took papers out of his bag. He set them on the table. He said, Judge Broderick received the evidence 8 days ago. Marigold sat down, slowly. Sinclair said he read the ledger cover to cover, then he read it again. Then he called his clerk in and dictated a filing order for federal marshals. The order went out at 4 in the afternoon on the same day the evidence arrived. Marshals have been dispatched to Denver, to Pueblo, to Santa Fe, and to the offices of Senator Mordecai Finch in Washington. She could not speak. He said Ambrose Thorncroft has been placed under judicial hold. He cannot leave Colorado territory. His assets are frozen. His attorneys have filed motions. Judge Broderick has denied every motion so far. She said, Senator Finch. Sinclair said resigned 3 days ago. Publicly, he cited health reasons. The papers are not going to accept that reason, she said, the land office superintendent. Sinclair said, under indictment. He has retained separate counsel, which is usually the sign that a man in his position is calculating survival, not defense. She said, the settlers. Sinclair said, Judge Broderick has issued an order freezing all contested Thorncroft Western land acquisitions. Families with disputed claims in 3 territories will receive notice to refile. The judge is preparing a letter to the territorial land offices that will go out next Monday. She said, how many families? Sinclair said, approximately 800 that we have identified so far. The judge believes there are more. She looked at her hands. Her hands were on the table. They were still. Sinclair said, Mrs. Haverford. She said, yes. He said, Judge Broderick asked me to tell you something in his personal words. She waited. Sinclair said, he said, tell her that in 22 years on the bench, this is the most thorough documentation of financial conspiracy I have ever seen. Tell her the settler she is thinking about will know her name. Tell her father would be proud. Marigold put her face in her hands, just for the count of 3. Then she lowered her hands. Cormac had not moved. He said, Marigold. She said, I am all right. He said, I know. She said, I need a minute. He said, take it. She stood. She walked to the window. She stood there and looked out at the January light on the South Fork of the creek. She was crying, not hard. She had made her decision 4 years ago about how much she was going to allow, but she was crying. Sinclair looked away. Cormac did not look away. He just watched her. Then he stood. He walked to the window. He stood behind her. He did not touch her. He said, you did it. She said, we did it. He said, you. She said, do not do that. He said, all right. She said, Cormac. He said, yes. She said, turn me around. He turned her around. She looked up at him. She said, later. He said, later. She said, not now, not in front of Mr. Sinclair from the Federal Circuit Court. He almost smiled. Almost. He said, later. She turned back to the table. She sat down. She said, Mr. Sinclair, there is one more thing you should know. Sinclair said, what? She said, there is a federal investigator who was ordered to bring the ledger back to Denver. His name is Ellery Osgood. He did not do it. He made a different choice, whatever the record shows about him. I want it noted that he protected me for 6 months before he made that choice, and that his son is very sick. Sinclair took out a small notebook. He wrote it down. He said, noted. She said, one more thing. He said, yes. She said, my father did not kill himself. Sinclair stopped writing. She said, he was murdered. Thorncroft's men, made to look like suicide. The evidence is in a wooden box in Mr. Haverford's coat. Mr. Osgood gathered it over 4 years. I would like it entered separately from the ledger case. It is not the same charge, but it needs to be filed. Sinclair looked at her. He said, Mrs. Haverford. She said, yes. He said, Judge Broderick will want to see this personally. She said, then he will see it personally. Cormac took the box out of his coat. He set it on the table. He set his hand on it. He looked at Sinclair. He said, every paper in this box goes into that filing, and every paper comes back. Now 1 page is going missing on the way to Santa Fe. Do we understand each other, Mr. Sinclair? Porter Sinclair, 26 years old, junior counsel at the Santa Fe Federal Court, looked at Cormac Haverford across the table. He said, yes, Mr. Haverford. He said it in the voice of a man who had understood. That night, after Sinclair had ridden out, after supper, after the stove was banked, Marigold sat at the rope bed on the edge of the mattress. Cormac was in the doorway of the other room, coat off, boots off, his arm still in the sling. She looked at him. She said, Cormac. He said, yes. She said, come here. He came. He sat on the edge of the bed next to her, not touching, waiting. She said, I have not been touched in 4 years. He said, I have not touched anyone in 12. She said, so we are both. He said, both. She said, all right. He said, all right. He kissed her, slowly. 12 years, slowly. She pulled back. She said, Cormac. He said, yes. She said, the lamp. He said, yes. He turned the lamp down. The room went dim. The stove ticked. Outside, spring was still weeks away, but the wind had lost the sharp edge it had carried since October. She did not flinch. Ellery Osgood rode up the Ainsley yard 4 days later. He was alone. He was on a different horse. He had no badge. He carried a small bundle wrapped in an oilcloth. Cormac saw him from the barn. Cormac stepped out with the rifle. Marigold came out of the cabin. She looked at Osgood. She said, "Cormac." Cormac said, "Yes." She said, "Put it down." Cormac lowered the rifle. Osgood dismounted. He walked to the porch. He said, "Goldie." She said, "Ellery." He said, "I did what I said I would." She said, "I know. Mr. Sinclair came 4 days ago. He said, 'I have brought you something.'" He unwrapped the oilcloth. Inside was a stack of papers, neatly tied, a ribbon around them. He set them on the porch rail. He said, "These are your father's." She said, "I have the will." He said, "These are not the will. These are other papers. I have had them for 4 years. I did not know how to give them to you, because I did not know how to tell you what they were until we had won." She looked at the stack. She said, "What are they, Ellery?" He said, "Deeds." She said, "Deeds to what?" He said, "Small parcels, land, Goldie, 27 separate parcels, all of them settler homesteads that Thorncroft had marked for acquisition in the survey scheme. Your father bought them, quietly, through a trust. Over the last 3 years of his life, he was buying them off the public roll before Thorncroft could touch them, and he was giving them back to the families, free." She stared at him. He said, "There are letters in that stack from the families thanking him, not knowing his name. He never let them know his name." He said, "Goldie." She said, "Ellery." He said, "Your father was not defeated." He said, "He was fighting." He said, "He just did not finish." She sat down on the porch step, not slowly. Her knees gave. She sat down hard. Cormac was there before she had touched the wood, his hand on her back. She was not crying yet. She was doing what her father had done, which was reading a document. She picked up the top letter from the stack. She read it. A family from Wet Mountain Valley, a widow with 3 children, a parcel of 40 acres that had been marked mineral depleted by a Thorncroft surveyor and taken off the settler roll, except a quiet trust had bought it back and given it to her. And the letter thanked God and a man she would never meet. Marigold folded the letter. She held it against her chest. She looked at Osgood. She said, "You have carried these for 4 years." He said, "I did not know how to give them to you until you were safe, until Thorncroft could not use them against you, until it was over." She said, "Ellery." He said, "Goldie." She said, "Where is Wallace?" He said, "Wallace is in New York. The doctor took him, free of charge, as I said. Wallace is going to live, Goldie. He is going to live." She said, "Thank God." He said, "Thank God." She said, "Ellery." He said, "Yes." She said, "Thank you." He said, "You do not owe me thanks." She said, "I know that. I am giving them anyway." He looked at her. He said, "I am going to leave now. I am going to go east. I am going to see my son. And then I am going to testify. And whatever comes after that, comes." Cormac said, "Ellery." Osgood said, "Mr. Haverford." Cormac said, "There is a room at the back of the cabin, and there is a bed in it, and there is coffee on the stove, and you have ridden a very long way to bring my wife something that has been hers all along." He said, "Stay 1 night." Osgood looked at him. Then Osgood said, "1 night." He stayed 1 night. He rode out at dawn. Marigold stood on the porch and watched him go until she could no longer see the horse against the low country. Then she went inside. Then she sat down at the table with the stack of deeds and the letters. Then she started reading them, all of them, every one. 27 parcels, 27 families. Cormac made coffee. He set a cup at her elbow. He sat across from her. He did not read them. He reached across the table. He tucked a loose strand of gold hair behind her ear. Then he sat back. He drank his coffee. He stayed. They stayed at the Ainsley place another week. Then old Ainsley wrote from Pueblo through his daughter and said the place was theirs to use as long as they needed, and he was not coming back this year, and possibly not next. Then Jeremiah rode down with news that Thorncroft had been formally indicted on 3 counts of federal corruption and 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud. Then Mabel rode down with news that a group of settler families in Cheyenne who had heard about Marigold Havelock through the Denver papers had sent a letter asking if they could meet her. Then the snow began to melt. It melted the way it always melted in that country. Slowly, in patches. The south-facing slopes first, then the creeks running loud with runoff, then the mud coming up brown under the retreat of the last drifts. On the first day of March, the temperature reached 40 and stayed there. Cormac saddled Bishop. He said, "I want to go up." Marigold said, "I know." She said, "I am coming." He said, "I was going to ask you to." They rode up the south trail. The trail was different in spring than in winter, the pines showing their actual color, the creeks running clean, the mountains a color that was not white anymore but was not yet quite anything else. Marigold had never seen the mountains in March. She rode beside Cormac on Petunia and watched the country come back to itself. The clearing came into view at the end of the third hour. She stopped. She looked. The front wall was gone. Half the roof had come down where it had lost its support. The interior was a slump of burned timber and collapsed shingle. But the east wall stood. The south wall stood. The back wall stood. The foundation stones on the east side sat exactly where Cormac had placed them 11 years ago. The barn was untouched. The wood pile along the east wall was intact. The stove was black and absurd in the middle of the ruin, and undamaged. Marigold said, "The stove." Cormac said, "It will outlast us both." She said, "That is comforting." He said, "It is meant to be." They rode down into the clearing. They dismounted. They walked the perimeter of what had been the cabin. She said, "Cormac." He said, "Yes." She said, "2 rooms." He said, "2 rooms." She said, "A door, not a curtain." He said, "A door." She said, "A window on the south side, a real one." He said, "The south wall was always the weakest for wind." She said, "Then we build it better." He said, "Then we build it better." She said, "For now, 2 rooms." He said, "For now." She looked at him. She said, "Cormac Haverford." He said, "Marigold Haverford." She said, "How much lumber?" He said, "More than last time." She said, "Fir or pine?" He said, "Fir holds better in freeze-thaw." She said, "Then fir." He said, "Then fir." They stood in the ruin. The sun was on their shoulders. She reached over and put her hand in his. He closed his fingers around hers. They stayed like that for a while. They started the work 3 days later. They did not do it alone. Ned Odell rode up with his father. Theo came from Pueblo, a group of settler families from Cheyenne who had heard about Marigold through the Denver Sentinel drove wagons up the South Trail with lumber donated from 4 different lumber yards that had refused to charge for it. An old couple whose parcel had been in the stack of deeds Marigold's father had bought back arrived on the 4th morning with a plate of biscuits and no other explanation. The woman was 63. She had eyes exactly like Marigold's aunt's. She hugged Marigold at the porch and did not say much. Then she went to help Mabel with the water. The front wall went up in 8 days. The roof went up in 12. The south window was cut and framed on the 15th day. It let in more light than the old cabin had held in the entire year Cormac had lived alone in it. On the 22nd day, the interior wall between the 2 rooms was framed and hung. Cormac stood in the doorway between the 2 rooms and looked at his wife. She was sitting at the new writing desk he had built for her under the south window. The March sun caught her hair through the glass, gold on gold. She had a leather book open in front of her, not the leather book, a new one. She was writing. He said, "Marigold." She said, "Yes." He said, "What are you writing?" She said, "A list." He said, "Of." She said, "Families, the ones from the 27 deeds, the ones Judge Broderick's letter will reach next week, the ones I want to write to, the ones I want to visit if I can, the ones I need to know are real." He said, "That is a long list." She said, "It is going to be a longer one." He said, "How long?" She said, 800 families according to Mr. Sinclair, probably more. He said, "Marigold." She said, "Yes." He said, "You are going to spend the rest of your life on this." She said, "Yes." He said, "All right." She said, "All right." He said, "But not today." She said, "Not today." He said, "The stove needs wood." She said, "It does." He said, "And it is very cold in here." She said, "It is not that cold in here, Cormac." He said, "I know." She looked at him. Her eyes were bright. She closed the book. She stood up. She walked to him. She put her hand against the side of his face the way she had that morning at the door of the burning cabin. She said, "Cormac Haverford." He said, "Marigold Haverford." She said, "2 rooms." He said, "For now." She said, "For now." She said, "Later." He said, "Later." Outside the cabin, the last of the snow was going. The pines were coming green. The creek was running loud with the runoff. And in Denver, a man named Ambrose Thorncroft was learning that his lawyers could not save him. And in a sanatorium outside New York, a 7-year-old boy named Wallace Osgood was beginning to keep food down for the first time in 14 months. And in a valley in Wet Mountain County, a widow with 3 children was receiving a letter from a federal circuit judge in Santa Fe informing her that she could refile a claim on land that had been legally hers all along. And in a rebuilt cabin in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, at a writing desk under a south-facing window, a list of names was beginning. 800 families, then more. A woman was going to write to every one of them. A woman who was 24 years old with gold hair and pale skin, who had ridden a mule up a mountain in a January blizzard, who had believed for 4 years that she was the daughter of a broken man. who had learned the truth on a January afternoon in a cabin she had come to love without meaning to, who was married to a man who watched her write and who did not interrupt, and who put wood in the stove without being asked. The mountain sat above them, enormous, patient, holding, because it was made of stone, and because the people underneath it had at long last built themselves something that could hold too.